Hello there! I've been promoting / trying a brand new lifestyle where everything I do is unfinished. I don't finish games, I stop watching movies halfway in, I don't even flush the toilet. This new lifestyle has actually made things much easier for me. Not having to finish anything is the best. I recently took an internship at a lawyer's office and haven't even finished filing the defense statements of my clients. This guy's getting life in prison for littering. And according to some people, Nintendo has taken a liking to some of these methods. Trust me, I know what unfinished looks like. I probably won't even finish the sentence.
Nintendo, everyone's favorite video game company that specializes in disappointing people in ways that weren't even thought possible. They didn't show up to my graduation. But anyway, there has been a lot of talk about Nintendo releasing games in an unfinished state. This has been a discussion topic for a while, but it really picked up around the release of Mario Golf Super Rush. A lot of people seemed disappointed with the lack of content in the game, and the announcement that there would be free updates to it did not help. These updates included things like new characters and new courses, so it prompts the question of whether this game is actually unfinished, and how many times in the past has Nintendo done this. So I will be talking about some of the usual suspects that come up when discussing this topic, and I'll give you my take on what actually qualifies as an unfinished game.
In the meantime, I'm gonna get back to filing some of these defense statements. This guy says he didn't burn down the hospital last week. My client says he did not burn down the hospital last week. It is not true justice if he is sentenced. That sounds way too finished. Let me change that. My client says he did not burn down the hospital last week. That is not true.
Okay, so first things first, I think using the term unfinished is actually kinda misleading in my opinion. When someone refers to a game as being unfinished, I tend to think of it as more of a game having a lot of bugs and glitches, hence being in an unfinished state. Games like Cyberpunk 2077 or The Elder Scrolls Oblivion fit this title a lot more. I think a better term to use is incomplete.
Okay, I know I put a lot of innocent people in jail, but in my defense, those statements weren't unfinished, they were incomplete. It's a big difference.
But I don't think it's a huge problem, honestly. They both get the basic message across, which is that the game is very much not in the state it should be when it's released. So now let's go back to where Nintendo stands in all this. First off, I think it's important to understand what drip feed is. No, it's not guys posting fit pics at gas stations. When drip feed is used in gaming, it means that content that is already made is added to a game little by little when they could very much be added all in at once. I think this is really where the confusion comes from. For starters, I think it's important to understand that a game getting content post-launch is not the same as an incomplete game getting updates until it's in a finished state. I've seen the argument used that Smash Bros. Ultimate is an unfinished game because of them adding Stage Builder and Home Run Contest in an update a few months after the game was released. This is a pretty dumb argument to me. Call me crazy, but I feel like Smash Bros. Can survive without Home Run Contest. I think there's a total of one person who plays Home Run Contest competitively.
That's not true, there's tons of us. There's me, there's...
Yeah, so I don't really think there's an actual argument to be had there against Nintendo. Only people with 6 fingers are willing to make that argument. Well, shit. But there are some actually very interesting cases that do come up when talking about Nintendo making incomplete games. So first off, we have Mario Tennis Ultra Smash. Believe it or not, this game is actually complete, unfortunately. The game was indeed released in a finished state, but Nintendo basically did what anyone who goes to the bathroom does. They intended to release a pile of shit. The game has basically nothing to do. It feels very incomplete, but no matter how much you stretch the definition, this game is not incomplete since they never added any extra content to it or showed any signs of the game being something else from what was advertised. Never in my life would I rather have been a victim of false advertisement. But I mean, this game gets a lot of shit, but it needs to be shit on for the right reasons, and being unfinished is not one of them. If you're going to burn someone at the stake, at least make your argument semi-believable. But there are some much more controversial games. And let's start with the game that spawned this whole argument, Mario Golf Super Rush, the brand new entry in the Mario Golf franchise. This is the first Mario Golf game in 7 years, since Mario Golf World Tour for the 3DS. People were fairly hyped for this game when it was first announced. All the trailers for the game looked very good, and it looked like a true step forward in Italian plumber athletics innovation. But then the E3 trailer came and there was a new piece of information released that ticked some people off.
And here's some news. Free updates are planned for future release, including additional courses and playable characters.
Build the Ark.
Yeah, free updates were coming to the game, which to a lot of people obviously means it's an incomplete game. I mean, let's take a look at every game to ever receive content after launch. Yeah, I don't really understand why people were criticizing the game for being unfinished when it hasn't even been released, but let's see what the game looked like at launch.
Nice shot.
Oh.
Yeah, it's Golf with Mario, and that's about it. There's a story mode and some other wackier modes, but for the most part it just feels like a standard golf game with some twists, which there's nothing wrong with, but I mean, I wouldn't say it's incomplete. None of the new updates are really going to fix any of the problems the game has. These updates are just new courses and characters, which I just see as a bonus and not a game-defining feature. By the time they're released, I feel like most people are already going to lose interest in the game, and there's not really much they could do to change that. But a Mario game that I do feel is a lot more controversial is Mario Tennis Aces. It is not a good time to be a reinvention of a Mario sports game that involves hitting a ball with a stick. At least they're not Mario Sluggers. Mario Tennis Aces was made by the same developers that made Mario Golf Star Rush, so that's why the games look very similar and have a story mode. So what exactly is different about Mario Tennis Aces? It doesn't have a perverted sentient explosive. Also, this game is very different compared to how it was originally. They added tons of new characters, reworked the tournament mode, made the online mode much more usable and stable, added a brand new mode, added an extra area to the single player campaign, let you remap your controls, and for some reason it took them several months to add a retry button.
I just bought a brand new copy of the game whenever I lost. There's no more space in my house.
This is way more content than the average game gets. These are actual game changers, or at least make the game way more compelling to be played. Yeah, they might not seem like big changes individually, but altogether it makes for a much better experience. About a year too late, this game to me honestly felt like it was in an incomplete state. If they had taken the time to add all these features to the game at launch, it probably would have been received a lot better than it initially was. There's really no benefit to having used the model that Mario Tennis Aces used. And incomplete Mario game problems don't end there, because Mario Maker 2 also suffered from this situation. God damn, this game was kinda disappointing at launch. I don't really think there were any glaring issues with the game. It just kinda felt like it was too similar to the original, and you really didn't feel you were missing anything by not playing the sequel. If you hate upgrading, that is.
I still have an iPhone too. I just found out Obama got reelected.
I actually think that Mario Maker 2 was a big step up from the original. It had tons of new enemies, it like stacked 10 bosses on top of each other, you could play online and with friends, and there were even world maps so you could combine all your courses. This is amazing! Every single feature was added like 6 months after the game came out. Yeah, no, this is a crime to gaming. I even started a Mario Maker 2 boycott. I didn't say it was a good boycott. But anyway, I feel like I would have liked the game a lot more if these features were there at launch, but all this content wasn't in the game until 10 months after it was originally released in April of 2020. That was the same month Disaster Report 4 was being released, so they were fresh out of luck. Well, at least the online content didn't take too long to be released, unlike Super Mario Party. That game did not get an online mode until more than 2 years after it was released. You can't blame Nintendo for being careful about adding online to their games. Online gaming has only been around for 15 years, but let's move away from Mario games and go to some other franchises that have had issues with being incomplete. Splatoon 2, the only game where you could spray cream-colored liquids on other people. Splatoon 2 was one of the first major games released on the Nintendo Switch, and it hadn't been that much time since the first game, only 2-year difference. But a problem many people had with the first game is that so much content was missing at launch. Now this wasn't a surprise, since Nintendo had said in a direct beforehand that stuff such as rank mode and other gear would not be made available until a few weeks or months after the game was released, but it still kinda made the game feel a bit empty at launch. But luckily, the gameplay was fun enough that it didn't really matter. So with Splatoon 2, they took the innovative route of adding basic features for an online game at launch, and it made for a much more successful game, who would have guessed? The problem that people do have with the game is that stuff like new stages and weapons were added in updates to the game, and some people thought it should have been in the base game. But what people don't realize is that Splatoon 2 is predominantly an online game. Sure, it has some single player modes, but I'm fairly confident that the developers made those by accident. But with it being an online game, it makes perfect sense for content to be added post-launch. Pretty much any online game made does this because unlike single player games or party games, online games need to be able to make their game's lifespan last as long as possible. And the best way to do this is to add content after launch. I don't think people are going to be going crazy over a slightly different colored Yoshi being added to Mario Golf.
Speak for yourself!
So no, Splatoon 2 is not an incomplete game. A game that does have a problem with this is God, what was it called? It's the one about body parts and like you can switch them around. I'm pretty sure one of the characters in this game is in Smash Bros. Oh yeah! Kirby Star Allies. So back when Kirby Star Allies was first released, it was a fine game, I guess. But all the levels were some of the easiest in the series, and there really wasn't a variety of allies you couldn't get. But that all changed about a year later when they added the mode Heroes in Another Dimension. This mode was a brand new single player campaign, and it completely reinvented the game. Each character felt much more important, and you had to truly master each character's abilities in order to get past certain areas. It really felt like this was what the original game was supposed to be, but that's the problem. This should have been the original game, and while I don't don't think the original was incomplete, it was just so barren that any new content would improve the game by leaps and bounds. So I think the claims about being incomplete are justified, but they're technically not, so oh wow, look how cute they are! But I think the number one game that really should be a topic of discussion about being incomplete is, get that shit out of my face, Animal Crossing New Horizons. Every single person who owns a Nintendo Switch was obsessed with this game at one point or another. I think there were even babies being born holding a copy of the game, but more than a year after it was released, it has received more criticism than when it was first released, which I find kinda funny. The big problem people had with the game was the amount of content that was being released that kinda felt like it should have been there from the start. Stuff like swimming or some villagers that just weren't there. Now many of these features were in the older games, so it's kinda surprising that they weren't there, so many people just thought, oh, they must have cut them. But no, it turns out a lot of these features were in the game's code. And then lo and behold, they were added to the game a few months after launching. The updates have slowed down, but some still have a sour taste in their mouth.
I wanted to be friends with a f***ing pink squirrel!
So was New Horizons an unfinished game?
Well, looking at the defense statements I wrote, or the funny name the police gave them, evidence to be used against me, I don't think Animal Crossing New Horizons is incomplete.
Yeah, Animal Crossing New Horizons isn't incomplete to me. It had a ton of content and people played it so much that they had basically done everything there is to be done. So for the people who pace themselves and play the game more casually, these free updates are just fun bonuses to keep the game entertaining. It didn't bring me back to the game because I'm fairly confident my village has fallen into anarchy. I'm pretty sure there's witch trials there now, but I just don't see why people are mad about this game. Would you rather the content not be there at all? I think Nintendo just didn't want people to get tired of the game, and some people don't like that, and that's fine honestly. It's important to understand when a game's an obvious scam or not. I'm sure the sales for New Horizons really suffered because of this.
So are Nintendo games unfinished? Everything I'm saying is going to be used against me in trial. I really don't think they are. Sure, there are some games out there that seem like they're in an incomplete state, but besides Mario Tennis Aces, I think the games are just bland to begin with. Nintendo obviously makes a lot of decisions and choices, and whenever I say that, that list just pops up magically. Driftveil is just a way to preserve the player base for a longer time. Is it a good strategy or not? We'll have to wait and see. Well, now it's time to meet my lawyer. F*** me.